In the second movie of working with imported 3D, we're starting to combine multiple elements, and this is where it gets a little more complex in working with Anime Studio Pro. Not difficult, just a couple little things to keep track of. I want to bring in a stock character and have him in our scene, and it's going to be one of the older stock characters. Let's come over here to our library palette. That'll think about it for a second, open one up, and let's grab, somebody that looks gladiatorial. How about Jai, since we've got him selected? I'll double click, and he comes into our scene. Now remember, we haven't moved any cameras, and Jai is coming in at 0 and 0. He is centered right there on the workspace and not matching the vastness of the Colosseum. There's a couple little things we need to do now to go ahead and edit these things to make them play nice together. The first is I'm going to come down to the camera zoom. I'll select this, and there's a number up here that is important to note. It says 60. This is not just an arbitrary number. In 3D, this would be like a 60 millimeter lens. Whereas, for example, your camera phone or digital cameras usually have about a 35 millimeter lens. So if I change this value right now to 35, click OK. We see everything reset in our scene, but the perspective for the Colosseum looks a little bit better. Now what I need to do is instead come back here to our track tools. We'll see that we have a Z space, a Z depth of positive 1.7. Let me change this to 5 and click enter. Now we're starting to see more, and we can see all of Jai in the scene, and we're seeing more of the Colosseum, but obviously it looks like he's standing on a deck of the Colosseum. That may be right where you would want to put your character. If it's not, then what we need to do is start moving around the Colosseum layer. With this done and highlighted, let me come over to the layer manipulation tools, and I will simply click and hold the shift key and drag my layer up a little bit and release. And it looks like he's below the scene. So let me bring it to right here. See if that's a little bit better. Yes, it is. And we've got an option now. The Colosseum needs to be a little bit larger, in my professional opinion. So I'm going to come back here and reset this to 1 across the scale at the top. So just tab through the value boxes. And there, we've got our Colosseum. It looks like Jai's in it now. If I want to go ahead and start working with the cameras, I can. But let's see how this renders out. And before I do that, let me see where everything is sitting in the scene using the orbit camera in this view down here. I'll click and drag and release. It'll take a second, and in theory, redraw. We can see the camera and Jai still quite, well, he's very large for the scene, and that may be okay as if we were doing a close-up. We can sit here and tweak and go back and forth and scale the scene a little bit, but what we may want to do to convey the sense of vastness is to go ahead and do a nice little camera rotation trick right here, the pan and tilt of the camera. After it's selected in this primary window right here, to go ahead and tilt our scene just a little bit so we can see more of the sky. Really subtle, but a nice little trick if we want to do that. If I want to go ahead and set these other views to see what's going on in the scene, I can click and activate and choose view. As it thinks about it, we can see the slowdown because of the program processing the 3D files. We can say right, we can see where things are and how close we are, just as a point of reference. I'm going to come back here and quit messing around with the cameras and go back to a single view. One of the largest challenges facing you using 3D in your scene is to make it look like it belongs in there, that it's integrated. We don't have a background in place right now, and if I do a render, we'll see Jai in here. Now remember, he is pre-animated when you bring him in. His cape is gently flowing in the breeze here, which is a nice start. We could go ahead and create a nighttime sky if we wanted, or we could do a little composition trick to start bringing these two together. We'll do that real quickly. With the Colosseum layer selected, I'm going to create a new vector layer, and we'll call this gradient, and choose OK there. What I'll do is grab my vector drawing tools. With the square selected, I'm going to go ahead and draw an entire square. But I'm going to highlight, and it looks like it's already lit up with a gradient right here. Let's open this up. Must have been the last default I had when I was working. Got a gradient with blue. I've got transparency engaged, so it's fading out. Let me move that up so you can see it. I'll choose OK. And it's got a heavy border on it, which I'm not excited about. So in case it creeps into the scene, let me highlight that and turn the stroke off. The gradient layer itself, I'm going to double click on. We get our layer options, and I'm coming down to layer blending mode, and I'm going to change it from normal to multiply and choose OK. This will look more like a nighttime scene with the ground getting lighter as we approach Jai. Let me go ahead and do a quick preview render. Now we're getting this nice cast type of darkness that comes down from the top. I could go ahead and play with this and tune it up so maybe the top decks are really dark, but this is a nice way to go ahead and start working and creating complex scenes that you just wouldn't want to draw in Anime Studio Pro, but you can make it look like they were drawn in Anime Studio Pro by using 3D imports.